Hi everyone, Titus here for part 6 of our Pong mini-series, where we recreate the classic arcade game in Unreal Engine. In this video, we'll create the title screen for this little project, so let's not waste any time and just jump right into it. Alright, starting off, we're going to right-click, we'll go to User Interface, and we'll select Widget Blueprint. I'm going to choose User Widget, and then we'll give it a name. We'll call mine WBP_title screen. We'll double click to open that up. The title screen is going to be pretty simple. We'll start off with a canvas panel. And then we'll go into the common folder and we're going to select text and we'll just drag a text block into the canvas panel. I'm going to anchor this one at the top center. Then I'm going to go back and hold Control and then go back and hold Shift while I click that same point to center my text. For the first text box, I'm just going to name this Pong, and then I'm going to increase the font size, and then I'll check the box to size to content so it recenters it. Now I want to use more of a pixel font style, so what we can do is import that into our folder here. So I have a pixel font, I'll just drag in. And then when it asks me to create a new font using the asset, I'll choose yes. And now I have my new pixel font right there. Alright, so I'll switch the font family to pixel. I think that looks a little bit better. And then this is my first element. Let's add another text block. I'm going to set my anchor to bottom center. And then I'll go back and hold Control. And then go back and hold Shift. Then for the text, I'll do my name, Titus Bray Presents. And then I will size the content, and then I'll increase the font size, set it to pixel. And then for the Y position, I want to move it up maybe -100. And maybe I'll do a different color just to make it different. All right. I think that looks good so far. Now the last thing we need is some buttons. I'll have a button for 1-player mode, a button for 2-player mode, and a button to quit. To be able to orient and kind of keep them in line, I'm going to use a vertical box. So we'll drag this here. We'll anchor that straight center. So we'll go back, hold Control, and then go back and hold Shift. And I'll set my offset appropriately. Now when I want to do this, I'm going to go into the common folder. And instead of dragging a button into the canvas, I'm actually going to drag the button into the vertical box. And then for the text element, I'm going to drag the text into the button. So it's basically a child of the button. Now for the first text element, I'll do 1-player. And then for the button, when I select this over here, I want to rename it. So instead of button_108, I'll do button player 1, and I'm going to check the box for is a variable. This is important, don't skip this step, because this is what allows us to create some code off a button click. Now you'll notice the 1-player is kind of cut off here. If we go back to the vertical box, and we select the size to content, it should correct that for us automatically. Now over the button, I don't really like the button color, so under color and opacity, actually under style, you have a normal, hovered, pressed, basically button style. So for the normal, I'm going to set the transparency on the tint to be 0, so it's kind of like see-through. And then for the hovered, I'm going to do something a little bit different. There's an outline setting and a tint. So for the tint, I'll set it to 0, but for the outline setting, the use brush transparency, I will uncheck. And then for the width, I'm going to set it to 4. The color, I'm going to do a bright white. And for the corner radius, I'll do 12 on each of the corners. That way it'll kind of round out when you move your mouse over it so you can see which option you have highlighted. And I think that's good for the styles. So now that we have a style created, I can collapse this button, and then I can right click on it and duplicate it. And now for this button, I'll just rename it to player 2. And then for the text element, we'll do 2 players. And then I can right click, duplicate that one. And then the last button we'll call quit. And then the text element inside of it, we'll just say quit. And because we're duplicating it, it keeps all the styles and everything that we need there. All right, and I did forget one thing. When we go back to the text element, I actually want to change the font family to pixel. And then I'm gonna bump this to maybe 80. Yeah, we'll do maybe 100. So we'll set that to pixel 100. And then quit, we will set to pixel and 100. All right, I think that looks okay. All right, so now that we have that selected, we can set up the code to execute on the buttons. We don't have the 1 player because we had to set up the AI for that. We'll do that in the next vid. But we do have 2 players and we can do quit. So if I select the button for quit, scroll down the bottom, I should have events showing. If you don't, make sure you have is variable is checked. And then you just hit the little plus sign. And then when the quit button's basically clicked, we can just call the quit game function. And we can go back to designer view, select the 2 player and scroll down. On clicked, we can create an event that says open level by name. And the level we made for the 2 player, we titled level 1. If you need to know it, just control spacebar and you can look at the level name right here. It is case sensitive, so make sure you match it. All right, and that completes the widget. So now let's actually create the level. So this is currently level 1. I'm gonna use a similar setup. So what I can do is just right click on level 1 and duplicate it. And then I'll just call it title screen. And then I will double click save selected. And now we are currently looking at title screen. If I go to the top and open the level blueprint, we can delete all this stuff. We are going to be changing the code in the title screen, so we don't really need the trigger boxes. We also don't need the paddles. But we do need the bumpers and we need the camera. So we'll keep those for now. And then in the title screen, I am going to use a event begin play node. Then I can just call the set view target with blend unchecked context sensitive. Function shows up there. And then for the target, we just need to do the get player controller. We cannot use the player state. We need the game function node. So make sure it's under game. You'll know you have the right one because it'll have the player index option showing. And then for the view target, we just need to use the camera that's in the screen. So to be able to get that, you just select it in the inspector so it's highlighted. You go back to the event graph and you can right click, create a reference, and then pass this in here. And then our blend time will set at 0, so it happens instantly. All right, and that is pretty much the title screen level blueprint code that we need. Now what we'll need to do is edit our game manager to handle creating the widget, because right now if we play this, it's just, you know, pretty much nothing. You see the HUD, which we don't need. So what we'll do is let's open our game manager. And we're gonna need a lot of space, so I'll drag this up a bit. And we'll expand it out. And I think for add to viewport, we will shift delete that because we are not going to be adding the HUD. We will move this back a smidge. And this part is what's going to be different. So we'll drag this down here. we'll break this connection and let's get to work here. So the first thing we'll want to do is we'll need to check the level name. So we can get the current level name. There's a function for that. And then we can right click, promote this to a variable, just call it level name, and that's just in case if we need it, so we can reference it later. And then we can come off into a branch check. And then what we can do is we'll say, is this equal exactly string? And then we can type in the string that we want to check against. So we're basically checking, is the level name exactly equal to title screen? We'll bump this, actually let's move this over here and this like this. So if the level is the title screen, then we should create a widget. The widget we should create is our title screen widget. You don't really need to store it as a variable because I don't think we're going to be using it for anything. So we just simply add the viewport. And then we'll want to, because this is a UI element, we'll want to set the player's mouse cursor so they can see what they're doing. So we can do show mouse cursor. I will uncheck context sensitive. We're going to set that to true, and then we need a reference. The reference, of course, is get player controller. We cannot use player state though. We need the game state one. And then after that, we should probably spawn the actual Pong ball. So I can just press Control D with that highlighted, pass that in there. And I think that's good for off the true pin. Now on the false pin, we need to get a reference to our heads up display. And then we need to add that to the viewport because now we're actually on a level that we're playing. And then we can come into our delay and then spawn like normal. So with that, you can see we now have our widget. If I press quit, it quits. If I press one player, it does nothing. If I press two players, it opens the level and then you can move around and do stuff. So that is working as expected. Now the next thing that I kind of want to do, which I think would be kind of neat for this setup is, I think the widget looks fine, but I think it'd be neat if there's some back and forth between the Pong ball and some maybe paddles in there. So while the player is selecting options or going through the menu screen, you can actually see the game being played in the background. So we can do that just pretty easily. What we'll do is we'll create an auto player. So under our BP player, we can simply right click and duplicate this one. And I'll just call it like an auto player. And if I go inside it, I'm just going to delete all our code that we had for the regular player. So it's going to be pretty simple. We do need a custom event, so we'll add custom event. We'll call this one track Pong ball. And what this is going to do is it's going to get an actor of class. The actor we're going to be checking for is the Pong ball. And then we'll want to promote this to a variable. And I'll call it the Pong ball reference. And then what I can do is I can just kind of keep this real basic. We'll just use some simple tick code. Off the tick function, I can say, is this valid? I'll check the Pong ball reference. Basically, is there something stored inside this reference? If there is, then what I want to do is I want to get my paddle, and I want to set the world location. And I want to split the structure pin here. Now if we go back to the level, our up and down, if I scroll out here, you can see our up and down is on the X axis. So I want to adjust the paddle's X value to match that of the Pong ball, and I want to keep the Y and Z the same. So what I can do is I can get the Pong ball reference, and then I can say get world location. I can split the structure pin. We only need the X value, so I can pass that in here, but we cannot leave the Y and Z zeroed out. So what we'll have to do is get the paddle and get the world location of the paddle. We will split that structure pin, and then we'll pass in the Y and the Z. And maybe I'll move this up here and move this back over here. But there's an issue with this. It's not going to work, right? Well, mainly it's not going to work because we didn't add the paddles, but there's also another issue with it. So if I add an auto player here and zero it out, and then maybe I move it to 2000, and I hold the Alt key, drag off, and maybe negative 2000. Now I got some paddles, but you'll notice they're not tracking. And that should kind of make sense. So the reason they're not tracking is because we've created the event to track, but we never called the event. So we got to figure out where to call the event from. I think what makes the most sense is we call the event from the Pong ball, right? Because we don't want to track the Pong ball if the Pong ball doesn't exist. And the paddles are in the world starting off, so they're going to be there first. When you spawn the Pong ball after, there could be a few frames or a few seconds before that object exists. So if you try to track it, that's why we're using is valid check, is because this thing will not be valid for some time. So if we call this code from the Pong ball, then it definitely exists because the Pong ball called it. So I think that'll work fine. So we'll open up BP_ball. And then under the event begin play, we can say get all actors of class. We'll do the auto player. And then for the array, I can pull off the array into a for each loop. So it'll basically loop through, find all the all the auto players that are in the level. And then for each one, we can call the track Pong ball custom event. And that'll basically tell that auto player to store a reference to this object that just got instantiated. Now if we play, you can see the paddles are tracking. That's working pretty good. And no matter, because we're still using the Pong ball's custom rotation, there'll be times where it's kind of, more horizontal like this, but other times where it'll be more vertical. No matter what, because it's using off the tick function, it happens, so quickly, it's going to be able to update and bounce the object back. Yeah, but I think that looks pretty good. The last thing I'd probably say is you probably want to get rid of the sound. Maybe the sound is distracting. So what you can do is we can kind of do more of the same. We have the projectile bounce, which says when the ball hits something, play a sound. So I can drag this off, break the connection. And what we can do is we can say get current level name. And then we can say equal exactly string, and we'll say, does this equal the title screen? And we'll come off into a branch check. And if it's the title screen, we'll do nothing. If it's not the title screen, then we'll play the sound. So now when we're looking, you see there's no sound. It just bounces the ball back and forth. But if we actually play a game, you can see the sound's actually working. Alright, good people, this concludes part 6. In the next and final episode, we'll create the AI agent for single player mode, but as always, thanks for watching, consider subscribing, and we'll see you on the next one.